Hello adventurers and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going on a very special tour and then we're going to come back and check out all of this behind me as we go through time to a very special and interesting dinosaur tour. You ready? This is going to be a wild one. Let's go. Okay, our day here is going to start off with a tour that is about an hour long. You can sign up. It's about $22 for an adult, but they take you out to an active dig site where you can see not only the bones that they currently are working on, but also some footprints. And I'm really excited about this. This is going to be so much fun. At the same time, they only do a few of these tours a day, so get here early because they fill up pretty quickly. I lucked into a single spot at the noon time when I'm here. Otherwise, I would have had to wait until 1:30.
As you guys were driving in here today, I bet you saw that lovely red soil out there on some of those hills. That is our Chugwater Formation. That is late Triassic in age, about 200 million years old. We don't find many fossils in that Chugwater Formation, but it is famous for some of the footprints that we found there. If you guys have been to Red Gulch, I believe Red Gulch is part of that Chugwater Formation. That rich red color is caused by iron within the soil that is oxidizing or rusting like a bike left out in the rain. Different types of dinosaurs, at least up here on the hill. 3 of those are those long plant-eating dinosaurs called sauropods. The longest of which is Diplodocus. A Diplodocus averages about 80 to 90 feet long. Next we have the Apatosaurus, averaging 70 to 75 feet long. Then we have the shortest of the 3, our Camarasaurus. If you guys went through the museum, you saw our resident Camarasaurus named Morris. He's the one peeking up over the wall into the gift shop to say hello. That is our Camarasaurus. They are, like I mentioned, the shortest, averaging only 65 feet long. Doesn't sound very short to me, but that is our most common dinosaur here on the hill and, fun fact, in all of North America. And we also find one type of theropod, or meat-eating dinosaur here on the hill, that is our Allosaurus. That would have been the apex predator in this area at the time. Oh my goodness. This here is our SI dig site, which stands for something interesting. So, whenever this area was first discovered in 95 or 96, they found some fragments of bone on the top of the ground here, and they thought they would dig further in and see what they could find. So, you can see kind of where we began here, all that very rocky substance that was all once on top of this here. And as they were digging down, first they used an excavator to get into the really rocky bit, and then moved on to shovels to get through this shady bit over here that kind of falls apart in your hand. But then as they got further into that shale, they found all of this mudstone here. Finding this mudstone, they realized they hit a different layer of rock. So they finished up with a shovel and began pulling out those paintbrushes, taking their time, being real patient. And they first uncovered this whole strip of land right here. So this mudstone here, they saw had a very interesting pattern on it, many divots and holes inside of it. And they realized eventually what they were looking at. You can see we have our best ones highlighted in that red paint here. Does anybody have any guesses on what these are? Yes, these here are all footprints. These 2 right here, the big brown ones, are sauropod footprints. We cannot figure out a specific species. They all kind of wore the same shoes. But these 2 right here, and that juvenile one right over there, have the distinct 3-toed claw of a theropod or meat-eating dinosaur. We believe Allosaurus, since that is what we have found evidence of here on the hill. So, these footprints tell us quite a bit about what the area was like at the time. So to leave footprints, it had to be very wet, very muddy, hence the mudstone. And then we found not only those sauropod footprints, which they're very tall and they could step into pretty deep water, we even found footprints from adult and juvenile Allosaurus. So we know the water had to be pretty shallow for them to be leaving footprints and not just swimming through the water. We also see here in our mudstone, there's not a lot of rocks within the mudstone itself. So the water was quite slow, very low energy. It couldn't push those bigger rocks into the area. So we think this was a shallow lakeshore environment right here. slow moving water, shallow enough to step in, that sort of thing. So as they were uncovering more of this beautiful lakeshore area right here, it's 150 million years old, they began to find bones as well, which is an amazing find in and of itself because it is very rare to find tracks and bones in the same site. We're one of only a few sites in the world that has this. But as they're uncovering these bones, they number them, excavate them, bring them down to the Dino Center before they realized what they truly had here. Once they stopped and they really looked, they realized over here, we have a bunch of caudal or tail vertebra scattered around this whole area here. As we come into the middle of the site here, we see this divot and all of these ribs and some hip bones. There used to be a femur here as well. Then they found some cervical or neck vertebra up here, some skull fragments, and a humerus, or the upper arm bone up here. We've only ever found this half, which is important for later. But as they stopped and they looked, and they realized how it's all laid out, they realized it was one animal right here. This is a juvenile Camarasaurus. So we're not entirely sure what happened to our young friend here. There's no major marks on his bones, so it would have been like a kill mark. So we believe it was natural causes. For all we know, it could have been sickness, it could have been starvation. But what we do know is that he came here to this lakeshore, fell over, and died here. And as he's sitting in this muddy, wet environment, he's sitting in the sun, and he's sitting, and he's baking, and he's rotting. It's getting generally very gross. But our Allosaurus here smelled a dinner bell. They came running to this site, and they fed on our juvenile Camarasaurus. All over these bones, we see small gashes and marks where the claws and the teeth were going at these bones to get the meat off of them to eat. And what's so amazing about that is that this is the only confirmed Allosaurus eating site in the entire world. You take strips of burlap and you dip it in a mix of hydroquinone plaster, and you wrap them all around the bone in many orientations and many layers to protect it as much as possible. It's like a cast you would get if you broke a bone. It's very protective, very hard. So after that is covered and as it is drying, they begin to do what's called pedestaling, where they dig underneath the bone to get up around it so we can do what's called the flip, which is the most terrifying thing you'll ever do as a paleontologist if you plan on being one, because if a bone's going to break, that's when it will happen. On the footprint here, we have a replica of a bone that was found right in that spot whenever this area was first uncovered. Looks like this here, found right inside the footprint. What that is, if you take a chicken bone, you put it in a cup of vinegar and leave it there for quite a while, that calcium gets leached out by the acidity of the vinegar. And that calcium is what keeps those bones hard. So after you take it out of that cup of vinegar, it'll be very bendy, very malleable. I've seen people that can tie bones in knots, which is disgusting to think about. But if we have things like our juvenile Camarasaurus here rotting within the water, this slow-moving, shallow water will be very disgusting, very gross after a while. So these bones sitting in here, something very similar happened to them. How small it is in comparison to this bone, it's almost this much of the whole bone here. This is lighter than that is. These fossilized bones are very, very heavy. It really brings that into bring into consideration in comparison there. You really
These are teeth, guys. Look at this. And she said that on the other side, you can actually see where one is coming down to replace it. This is also a toe of one of the big guys that they found here. Oh, this thing's heavy. Wow. This tiny rock was actually in the stomach of a dinosaur because they didn't have teeth that could chew, so they would be able to basically roll rocks around in their stomach to digest. Okay guys, we just got back from the incredible tour. Our tour guide was amazing. She's actually a geology student who wants to go into paleontology, and she was so knowledgeable. Take the tour. It is incredible to see what they have found, including something super unique to the Wyoming area, but incredibly unique to the world. They found their very only feed site for a specific kind of dinosaur, and to do that they have to have 3 things present, and they had all of them, so that was really awesome. But now it's time for us to go explore the actual museum. I'm so excited. Now, inside the museum itself, it starts off with a series of different displays that show us some of the various fossils that have been found, and then also a timetable as to how the Earth was formed, and also what we might be able to discover from the different things that we have here in this case. For example, right here it says the majority of the Earth's history came before the dinosaurs. And so we're learning about history before the dinosaurs themselves. But the earliest chemical traces of life are actually found in rocks 3.8 billion years old. The Earth started off very different than it is today, and it's changed over time. And as we go through this gallery, we can see just what that means and how that has shifted and what made all that possible. And then eventually, of course, you see signs of life with the dinosaurs. And then even further down, you see the signs of life with like people. So it's kind of interesting to see the timetable and also how they're able to determine this through science, through digging down deep. And I think that that's the greatest part of coming to a place like this and why you should come. So with that said, let's go look around and see what all we can find and what we can learn about the earliest inhabitants of this amazing place that we live today. About 630 million years ago, Earth was recovering from a glaciation, which means that there were glaciers and ice everywhere. So soon after the snowball Earth period, life finally began to take on complex forms. And these were some of the earliest complex forms that you could find. Now these might not look like much, but believe it or not, this was the first form of life that they were able to detect here in the world, with little tiny pieces with very small organisms and fauna. Plants inhabited the world long before people or animals. In this section, you will find fossils throughout the world, not just from here in this area. And because of that, you can see how things might have had uniformity because the world was a very different place. It wasn't until life began to take form in a more physical being that was larger and more mammal-like, then you could see the differentiation between migratory patterns and things like that. A lot of the things that you find were from waterish species. Water covered a lot of the world at that time, and so being able to get here and see the very origins, not just from here in Wyoming, but from throughout the world, you can see a lot of similarities in these earliest things that they've discovered. Trilobites have been found in numerous locations, including areas here in the United States, such as Wyoming and Oklahoma, mentioned in the case, but also you can find some here in New York, Utah, and you can see from the complex nature of these what they might have looked like and what they might have been able to do. In fact, they have different classifications of trilobites, including bottom-dwelling. Variants started to come to life within trilobites, including spiny trilobites, large spiny, and also something called an index spiny right here. But this piece is amazing. This is a trilobite mass death, and it's a large assemblance of these trilobites that actually is a really complex look at what life was like. Now, if you are looking at this and counting, overall they have determined there are 60 of them in this one mass. But again, lots of different things went into the world changing and creating a world that was safe for things to actually live on the surface. And here you find life in slow motion as they show you various kinds of crinoids, sea urchins, and even sea cucumbers that have been able to be seen through casts of areas that they have found that are no longer underwater. The world has shifted a lot, and areas like Wyoming, that are very much landlocked now, used to be underwater in some capacity. We've gone to places like the Grand Canyon previously, where the Grand Canyon started out where the canyon top is now, and it just worked its way down through the layers, through the rivers. Similar things have happened with ancient oceans throughout the entirety of the world, which brings us to why you can find sea creatures in otherwise very dry territories now. Another super large crinoid plate right here. This one has at least 10 different crinoids on it. And this one is from Morocco. This is a huge cross section right here that shows you just how big that this discovery really was. A complete ammonite We find a lot of these in the Texas area, despite Texas also being a more considered dry place now. In drier areas, they find a lot of sea creatures, a lot. And so whenever you're out and about looking through the dirt, if you see something that looks unusual, who knows, you may be finding something that is quite unique and special. So don't just throw it to the side and be like, ugh. Instead, maybe take a closer look. But then along came life. More than just crinoids, more than just sea cucumbers. You started getting into ancient sharks. Believe it or not, they have found that a shark existed over 50 million years ago. And they're finding through the fossils and through the imprints that sharks actually have been around for a very long time. But according to this, they're not your father's jaws. They're a little bit different. But why? It mentions here that part of the reason why people think that they're not the same is because they think that sharks are in fact unchanged since they first appeared. However, they're actually dramatically different. They were not designed to zip and zoom like the sharks of today. They were slower and they were very, very different in the way that they not only looked, but also navigated. Believe it or not, they were also longer. I'm sure they were very scary because the sharks of today, some of them were quite large, but apparently these were much bigger. But they were classified in a classification with other things, such as stingrays. And they actually split off from other fish approximately 450 million years ago because their skeletons remained largely cartilage for most of their lives. Fossils of sharks and also rays are usually less common than other groups of fish. Their teeth are found a lot. Their teeth are found more than any other part of either one of these. It's a little harder to see this one because of the glare, but this one was from Germany and it was considered to be from the late Jurassic period, and it was the largest. And it could measure up to 3 meters overall, and it had a different kind of mouth and then also teeth. And then here we have some illustrations of what some of the spine-grown animals could have been. In fact, nearly 550 million years ago, before backbones or even before brains, they had a very specific kind of critter. This guy right here. This guy right here. But by 530 million years ago, they started to get an evolution of style, which brought them a backbone and led us to these, the pancake jawfish, the spike nose assemblage, the spike nose jawless fish, and then an early jawless fish right here. Here we have some of the not just bottom dwellers, as they call them. These are placoderms, and they're best known as an early group of jawed fish. And here you can find some of the casts of these, as well as what they might have looked like in person if you were to run into them on the street. Unlike these look terrifying. These were a type of armored placoderm, and they were quite large. In fact, this one right here, it says it could measure up to 33 feet, and it is considered to be an extinct animal. Now, the strongest bite was over 11,000 pounds of crushing power. Can you imagine? Now, they looked more similar to this in reality with all of their flesh. As things continued to evolve, they started to have feet and started to walk and didn't need to live in the water, and they were able to breathe the oxygen and do different things. And because of that, we started to receive a lot more information throughout the historic record about different kinds of animals, not just plants and fish. That brings us to our big gallery. It's the dinosaur, guys. It's the dinosaurs. Things grew and evolved and changed. They actually have a family tree here that can kind of show you all of the variations of every single kind of dinosaur, where they came from, how they evolved, what it is that they do now. And also individual displays with all the different kinds, from the flying bird-like dinosaurs to the ones that are more like alligator-like, and everything in between. This is incredible. Now, something we learned on the tour here is that there was an investor in this property who wanted to make this possible. He not only negotiated with the man who owned the land to purchase the land, but also opened this center for us all to visit today. Now, he kind of is behind the scenes and lets them just do the thing that they do to find out more and more, because he's curious and wants to know more about what all this world has to offer. But in doing so, it has allowed us to come in here and see these amazing pieces. But not only that, because of a Wyoming law, normally if you find a fossil, it belongs to the state. He paid for the permits and the permissions to be able to keep anything that they find here on site so they can research it, study it, and learn from it, and then share it with us. So anything that you're seeing with a little Wyoming tag from this area, guess what, guys? There was a lot of love and labor that went into finding that to bring it to us, and it is incredible to see something from the past tell us the story today. Like this right here, it might just seem like a little tree trunk, but this was actually discovered from the Jurassic period right here in Thermopolis, and it was found at the Wyoming Dig Center. Now, some of these larger pieces, they have brought in from other places, and they allow us to see through casts, and in some cases, real fossils, what exactly that the world has seen over time as it has grown and changed. You'll want to look up and look down, because there are amazing dinosaur facts everywhere that you go. And with each piece that you find, there's not only a sign to tell you about it, but also to tell you when it dates on the actual carbon dating map, and then where we currently are on that map in comparison. So you can see the complete and total amount of years that it would have taken to get from where we are to where this was actually living, and also where it was discovered. This one in particular is pretty interesting because it is a horseshoe crab trackway that is a death trackway, and it's considered to be a very rare find, and you can go all the way over to the imprint at the very end where you actually see the horseshoe crab. Signs clearly mark like this one if you're looking at a replica or if you are looking at the actual fossil itself. And I think that that is also very helpful for us to see that the bones are very fragile, so a lot of times in museums they do have to display replicas so that we can get full context. Especially considering some of these, there have been so few that have actually completely been found intact. And so they piece them together to put them into a perfect condition of what we now know them to be, so they can study them and learn from them. But here in the museum, they have several different replicas that we can look at so that we can get a better idea as to how large these things are. Like this guy right here, he's 15 feet in wingspan, but he's not even the biggest one. This guy over here, 18 feet. We also have a great source of information for each of the dinosaurs that we see, including how much that they might have weighed in some cases, how long they might have been, what their characteristics are that they've noted from the fossils that they've found. Some of them have incredibly long spiky teeth, others have spikes on their backs, and so each one of them tells why that they think that they had each one of those items and what it would have done for them. Like this guy right here. For context is this guy right here. And it says here that he was actually spiked and also contained plates that were bony, and they had several functions. Researchers agree that the plates were used in a way to defend themselves against predators, but they also made them look larger and more intimidating. Whereas if you're really spiky, you're less likely to have a predator want to just bite down on you because it's going to hurt their mouth. So they think that those spikes were helpful in that. You know those medieval tools that were like a bat with like spikes on it and they would swing them? It's kind of like that. On the other hand, this is a velociraptor from Mongolia. And if you try to imagine yourself at this time, you might get a look at one of these guys. They're considered to be a 6-foot turkey, but they move like a bird, and they're light, and they bob their head, but also visually, they look kind of like a T-Rex. Now, I know the movie Jurassic Park took a lot of liberties with the creatures that they shared. However, there is a point where the velociraptors themselves, they do actually mimic that, almost like movement of the head as they are coming toward the people. And also think of the fast nature, because even though, again, a loose interpretation, it gives you context as to how this thing would have moved. And that is something that they have determined is true by the way that their footsteps have been found, or by the lightweight portion of their body and how it would have been nimble. Here they also have a depiction of a fight which would have broken out with this guy in the back and then this one here in the front, which would have had a very long neck, so it probably would have been a juvenile because it's smaller, And sure enough, right here, again, we learn a little bit more about what this would have been like. And what we again learned from the sign is that it was a medium-sized theropod, meaning it was a meat-eating dinosaur. So this guy who's attacking, he was a meat eater. And also he lived during the Jurassic period approximately 158 to 155 million years ago, based on the geological evidence that was found around the bones of the body. Now the guy that he's going after is a Belosaurus. See, it has the pronunciation key there, and it was from a quarry in China, and they produced 17 incomplete skeletons at that time. Now this was more of a plant eater, so you see here this guy was much smaller in nature when it comes to the one that they found versus this guy. Again, both of these are replicas, but it gives you kind of an interesting interpretation of what might have actually happened at the time. So the bone bed here has actually uncovered several things that are very similar to the long neck guy over there. And that's why it's important for this to be such a unique site, because by finding more of those, they're able to learn more about their migration, their habitat, what they did, how they might have died, and various other things. We learned up on the top of the hill on the tour that the juvenile that they found steps for, they found teeth of predators, and they figure what happened was that he got up there and something happened and he died. And then he fell into the water and the scavengers came and fed off of him. And so he wasn't killed like in this interpretation. However, by seeing how that works, they can better understand how the behavior of the meat eaters versus the plant eaters would move, and how that they would interact together, and how some of the other creatures, including the armored one, might have retaliated against. But there's a lot more here, and I'm really excited to share this with you. So we're about to go into the Wyoming Dinosaur Center area, and then we're going to move on to this guy back here. So at the beginning of the tour, she walks you through all of the different levels, and here you can see what kind of rock might exist in each of those levels, with a description of those a little bit more in detail. And the Morrison Formation, that's the one that they're most predominantly looking for dinosaurs in here at the dig site, and that is what caught the attention of the first man who wanted to dig in this area. There are a series of tools, which we see here, but also saw on the tour, for how that they would excavate very carefully each of these bones. And the Morrison Formation, apparently you can brush away the dirt much easier, and it's a more navigatable surface than some of the harder bedrock kind of feeling than some places have. After they are able to find something, they then have to be able to move it, and they form a plaster jacket, which they were actually working on a couple of these up in the dig. And you can see here, after they have put the plaster jacket on it, they have to do what they call the flip, and then they can preserve it and bring it down so that they can further study it. We also have a little map here of the Wyoming Dinosaur Center and the dig sites, and each one of them is marked with a representative of letters based on what kind of site that it is. And then you can also see what kind of dinosaurs that they have actually found in that site. Sauruses and Apatosauruses and all sorts of other things. And along the way, we're also going to be able to see some of those things here in this case. So these are some of the things that they have found. This is a jaw element, and then also you can see some of the rocks that some of the dinosaurs would have swallowed to help them process their food. There are criteria for which that they determine that these rocks are actually used. It's not just your regular shiny, like circular rock. They have found some brain cases, and these were found in 2 separate dig sites here on property. They also have found this, which is a foot piece in the back there, and then in the front you have a vertebra. This is one of the most interesting things that we learned on the tour. They have an articulated foot, and they found this articulated foot and others in this area, and they called it the foot site quarry. And they said that probably what happened was in this area there was quicksand, and so the dinosaurs would step down and they would get stuck, and that was it. And so they're trying to trace down from that point to see if they can find more, because they have found that some of these are attached to full leg bones, and so they're digging down if they find a leg bone to see if they find more intact feet. Then this is kind of fascinating because these are all teeth from Allosauruses. Now we learned that the Allosaurus was able to regrow teeth very rapidly, so they would shed teeth as they were eating, or if they chipped them, and they would just come right on off, and then a new one would grow in almost immediately. On the tour, I got to hold a cast of the teeth in the jaw, and one was coming out, and that was incredible. Like, I've never been able to get that close to something that they have done a cast of. That was just really cool. And yes, it wasn't the real fossil, but we also did get to hold the real bones up there. And that's what makes the tour so worth it. Because here you can look at them and it's incredible, but being able to hold it and feel the weight is just a new experience altogether. Now this is really cool. This is a real fossil of a Camarasaurus found here in the dig site. You can see them excavating and uncovering and building a frame for this guy. And this is a pretty common find. They found several of this particular kind of dinosaur here in this area. Now, it's anywhere between 24 and 65 feet long, 15 feet tall at the hip, and weighed 20 tons. Now, as you're looking at it, you'll notice some of these are obviously grayed out areas. These are bones that they haven't yet found, but the ones that are in the black, they change colors as they sit. And so all of these, unfortunately, this head itself is a replica, but it is a very cool look at what this guy might have looked like, because there's no way we could see him from the top because he is that tall. Just to give context as to what I mean, that is the roof of the building. It is a very tall building, and he peeks over into the other side, and an average person, well, I think you can see, we're not that tall in comparison. I think you can see now why this is incredible, because they have found so many bones here. When they started digging, they started to realize that there were groupings of bones, and they're still working on this one area because they found so much, and they don't want to abandon it until they've gone through thoroughly. Now, there are tons of mountainside areas here that you can go through, and eventually they will continue to persist and move forward. But it's just a painstaking process. It's very tedious and slow. And so as they find things, it's like a moment of happiness every single time. I'm about to show you where they actually go in and start to research and uncover and look at these closer. But first, let's do a little bit more of a walkthrough so I can show you a few more things. I'm leaving several pieces of this for you guys because I think it's incredible and you need to see it for yourself. This is one of the best places I have been when it comes to dinosaurs, because you can both go to the dig site and then come inside and have so much knowledge and also so much visual representation of what they're finding. Okay, we're about to go over to the window where you can see what they're working on. But also another neat thing about this particular site, if you are wanting to get hands-on and actually dig yourself, they have a few programs for that. Go check out their website. You can sign up and actually take a half day or a full day and be able to go up onto the mountain and dig yourself. They kind of tell you how to do it and walk you through the process, and then you get to learn as you go. And I think that that is incredible. And it's something that would be a one-of-a-kind experience. If I would have known that they were doing that, I would have done that today. I will be back to do that in the future. Again, this is one of those groups, and they're working on it with the volunteers, but this is also where that they can go in and uncover things and do research in this little lab right here, which is a really neat process. This open lab setting allows everyone to get hands-on, to learn about the tools of the trade. If you have kiddos, this allows them to kind of be inspired if they are thinking about being a paleontologist. And I think that that's incredible, but also to have that one-on-one with the individuals who are here, either who are volunteers or who are here on various programs, I think is absolutely amazing, in addition to the regular staff who is fully involved in hands-on. So very, very neat. But with that said, there's a couple more things as we proceed to the gift shop and wrap up this video. This guy right here, I wanted to make sure I pointed out to you all, this is from South Dakota. It's a replica, but in 1895, an American paleontologist found him, and wow, this is an extinct sea turtle species, and you can see how huge it really is. Regular sized person, sea turtle. It is tall, it is huge. Each of its little finger phalanges is probably the length of half of my body just for these. And realistically, putting it into context, if you've watched my entirety of my channel, he is as big as my small van. And I mean that lengthwise. Widthwise, much larger. So if you've ever seen an MV200 or a Chevy Express, that guy, that's how big it is. Here we have a replica of a human leg, okay? Just for visual context there. Here we have a replica of an Apatosaurus leg with the foot in comparison. Side by side. It's undeniable the sheer size of this guy. In fact, they could be up to 75 feet overall. Yeah, just let that soak in. And for further visual, this is his foot versus my foot. I wear a size 7.5. His foot is bigger than half my body. Okay guys, and just like that, we have completed one of the coolest dinosaur museums that I have been to, and we're walking away with a free book. They have these right inside, so pick up one of them for the kiddos. I picked up one for my mom for her science class. And then there's this guy. Oh, there's this guy. We better get out of here. Remember guys, we're not here for a long time, but we are here for a good time. If you are interested, even in the slightest bit, about dinosaurs, you should make this center one of your bucket list stops. I think that you will love it and you will not regret it. The tour was amazing, and I will be back for that digging. I will be back. Till next time guys, bye.